athletics enthusiasts. Welcome. This is our first edition. We'll be exploring all things athletics, answering your questions and providing our athletes, coaches, officials and supporters with the latest information and anything you want to know. Today we have two of Oceania's finest technical officials. First of all, Joe Stevens, Assistant Technical Manager at the 2018 Commonwealth Games, and Helen Roberts, one of our 4 international technical officials from the Oceania area. As you will see, we're all wearing a shirt from different competitions. This one's from 2017 Area Champs that I've got on. And Joe, we'll start with you. Just give us a bit of brief background into your officiating, how you got started, and maybe a memorable competition.
I got started in 1998 with my son, who was a hammer thrower, so I've been involved as an official for the last 20-odd years. I've technical manager at Athletics SA for 15 years. I've been the technical manager in the tech shed at 2006 Melbourne Commonwealth Games and assistant technical manager at Gold Coast Games. Also involved in outer stadium for Athletics Australia and Oceania as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Helen, can you briefly introduce yourself and what shirt you're wearing?
Hi, I'm Helen Roberts. I'm wearing my Carly World Youth 2015 uniform of the competition. It's important to me because it was my first ever outing as an ITO. Just a bit of background. In that meet, Sydney McLaughlin won the women's 400 hurdles as an under-18. Mondo Duplantis won the men's pole vault. Nicholas Carl, who just won the last decathlon, he won that decathlon there. Sunny Brown from Japan won the 100 and the 200. Salwa Ednasar, the 400-metre runner from Bahrain, the world champion, she won the 400. And Chespool, the Kenyan steeplechaser. So as you can see, and our very own Darcy Roper won a silver medal in the long jump there. So I could be truthful and say this just happened to be the shirt I was wearing today, which was truth, because every competition I do is special, and I love it for different reasons. One of my favourite shirts is one of my ones from Oceania, and because that sort of gives us that feel of community, and which is what we have. So, yeah, every shirt's important. I started officiating in 1987. I have been in athletics as a kid. My parents were both technical officials, and I've been lucky enough to do Sydney Olympics, the Rio Olympics as an ITO, the Commonwealth Games in 2006 and 2018, the World Champs in Doha. I've led a very blessed life as far as my officiating goes. I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, you both have officiated on some of the bigger stages, but I think that's something that we at Oceania Athletics appreciate, that you're both down at your local interclubs regularly officiating locally as well. So thank you. Thanks for joining us. We'll get started with the first question. We're talking about all things implements here today. As you can see, Joe is holding a couple of javelins in his hands, so they're not just to throw at the screen when he doesn't like the question. He's going to walk us through what takes place and walk us through how you're checking an implement, what are the main reasons that an implement may be knocked back from going into the pool of competition implements.
Okay, so prior to checking, we check in an implement, we do first a visual check of the implement. So in this case with this javelin, it is bent up the top. So there's no use checking this implement in, so we won't accept it by the athlete. With a shot put, this shot put has got a dent in it, which could be used as to help an athlete get an advantage. Similar with this discus, it's protruded in the middle, and also can give an advantage. With the hammer, I don't know if you can see it, this handle is incorrect. It's out of shape. So we wouldn't accept that either. Here's a brand new shot put, fully Hasn't even been used, so it's all painted. So once we accept the implement, we give the athlete a receipt for their implement, and then it's weighed. And from then on a javelin, there's 20 checks. There's 4 on a shot, and so on. And then they're put in competition, and they're sent out to that event that the athlete is competing in. And then once the competition's finished, they're brought back, and then they can collect it after that event. Or if he's in a final, it's after the final.
Yep. And that implement's available to all competitors?
That implement's available to everybody in the competition.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Our next question is, the implements have now got onto the field of play. What can I do as an athlete, as a shot putter, as a discus thrower? I see on TV that they're putting chalk or things on their hands. What can I do as an athlete to the implement, to my hands, to maybe get some extra grip?
Okay, so there's sort of 2 parts to this question. What can you do out on the field besides adding chalk to the surface of a discus and a shot put? There's basically nothing you can do. You can, with javelin, you can't put anything on the implement itself. It's got to be on your hands. It ends up on the implement. I totally understand that. But you can't grind it because it ends up in the grip and we can't get it out. And just because you like to have a really chalky grip on your javelin, it doesn't mean the next person who wants to use that implement does. So we're vigilant with with looking after our javelins, particularly with the grip. Basically, though, there is nothing you can do to alter it once it's out on the field. If it needs repairs, the officials will try and assist as best they can to keep the implement in the pool. Sometimes a discus will pop out of the metal ring a little bit. We can sometimes push that back in. Hammers are often getting a little bit bent and out of shape with the wires. We can do a little bit of work with those, or tightening up the 12 bits at the bottom of the hammer. But basically, if the officials can't get it right within a little while, it just gets taken out of the competition pool and it's gone. So an athlete can put anything, put the chalk on the surface of a discus. They can put it on their hands. They can put it on their neck if it's a shot put. There's some interesting things coming up, I suppose, with the whole COVID-19 situation. One of the things that used to regularly be done was people would spit on their hands or spit on spitting on the implement has been done since I was a kid. It's been done even longer than that. In this day and age now, I can see that's probably going to be a thing of the past. We'll be probably becoming a lot more vigilant with people and their bodily fluids. I can also see, this is my personal opinion, that the day of the chalk bucket for the communal chalk bucket might be gone as well. Well, that's something we'll need to keep our eye on and assess what the health guidelines come out with. I can also see our officials wearing gloves, particularly on the fall, and suddenly wipes and hand sanitizer being at every event site for the athletes to use, which then might add a whole range of other interesting things. So things to remember is that you can't do any changes to an implement once it's there. If you put an implement into the system and it hits the cage and it gets a ridge on it, we take it out. If we can't fix it straight away, it gets taken out of the competition and left out. Does that answer you?
That does. It brings me to my next question. What happens if, particularly in a major competition, that an implement's damaged beyond repair? Say a javelin breaks and there's none of that model to be able to be available to the athletes in the competition. What happens then?
What is supplied on the field is the best of what's available at that stadium. So prior to all competitions, the technical delegate will check over all the implements and recommend which implements we use. And from then, that's the best of what's available at the stadium. So that is all taken out to the site. So there's usually about 3 of all different brands that are available at the site. And they have to use the best of what we've got.
And Helen, I believe you might have a story about someone breaking their javelin or...
Oh, someone breaking a discus.
Discus. I didn't know you could break a discus.
Well, it's actually quite easy, particularly when it's a $1,200 Jürgen Schultz discus, which is the brand of the world record holder, and it was owned by Peter Elvey from New South Wales. It was in the competition pool, and a young man who wasn't of the quality even of Peter Elvey decided he'd throw it. Now, it was very dear to Peter Elvey because it had been personally signed by Jürgen Schultz, and the guy threw it into the pole of the cage and the thing just disintegrated. And there was lots of crying and gnashing of teeth by officials, by Peter Elvey, but really there's nothing you can do. It's in the competition pool. That's one of the risks you take when you put your favourite implement in to be used.
And speaking of implements, what happens if an official or an observer detects an implement being tampered with during a competition? The bigger competitions is more official, so you might become more aware of it. What rights does an athlete have if they possibly get warned?
Well, looking at it from an official's point of view, every official should be on the lookout for athletes doing things. Well, I don't mean, you're sitting there looking and trying to pick fault with every little thing an athlete does, but you need to be aware. So if you notice, as an official, if you notice something is happening, you'd go and let your chief know, and the chief would go and talk to the athlete and basically telling them to cut it out. If they keep going, then the chief will refer that through then to the referee. Now, in most competitions that we have, our referees tend to float around between many different event sites, and that's normal. At major meets like our Australian Championships or at the Oceania Championships or the World or Olympic Games, you have one referee at each event site, so it can be dealt with straight away by the referee. If they've already been spoken to and then they keep going with it, the referee might issue a yellow card. It depends on what it is they're doing and how severe it is that they're doing. That it might end up being a red card. So depending on, again, if it's repeated, if they keep doing it, if they're not listening. Now, it's important after a first warning, though, that if, as an athlete, you need to realise that people are seeing what you're doing, and so you need to back off. Otherwise, it escalates. If you end up with a yellow card, that follows you right through the competition, and not just for that event, but for every event of that competition. If you end up with a red card, you risk. Well, a red card means you're disqualified. It's the same as if it in all sorts of things with football. Red cards, 2 yellows is the same as a red. So you're then out of the competition. For the rest of the meet, you're out. You're done. So it's taken as a serious thing, getting a card. So it's something to remember. The other thing you need to remember, sorry, I know this is a little bit off topic, but if you end up with a red card, you also open yourself up to your member association putting some sort of disciplinary action on you. Probably not for something like this, but if you turned around and then abused the officials at the site as well, because they're telling you to stop doing something. So you can end up getting another sanction of some sort. So as an athlete, you need to listen to your officials. They'll hopefully give you a warning before they pull out a yellow card, but you can't, if you've been seen tampering with it, basically that's what's going to happen. You're going to end up with a card.
Yep. Thank you, Helen. Joe, is there any last sort of words of advice if I'm coming for the first time to check in my implement? What words of advice would you give someone?
There is a ruling that you should be presenting the implement at a minimum of 2 hours prior to your competition. So make sure that your implement is checked in 2 hours prior to your competition. So So there's enough time to check all the implements, depending on the local organisation committee, what they stipulate. Sometimes it's 3, but majority is 2.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe. Helen, is there anything we've missed so far?
I don't think there's anything we've missed. I just think it's important that as athletes, you realise that the officials are there to as a resource for you. You can ask for assistance. You can ask about different things anytime you like, and somebody will respond to you. But remembering, of course, that we're there to keep it as a fair competition for everyone.
Exactly. The officials are a great resource and always there and always friendly and willing to help out for any athlete, coach, anything. So firstly, I'd like to thank, that wraps it up for today. I'd like to thank Joe and Helen for coming on our first edition of OA Live. I think it's something that it's going forward is going to be a great resource for not only athletes but coaches, officials coming through the ranks, and it's good to see our officials helping out so much. So thank you for everyone that submitted questions so far. We are going to get to our questions over the coming weeks and months. This is going to go for a while, so we will get to everyone's questions. If you do have more questions, please submit them via OAA social media channels, and we'll get to them. We've got some great guests lined up and great officials coming up over the next few weeks. So we thank you for that, and good night.